A 19-year-old girl can't prove her American citizenship. So what I want to discuss here is nobody can. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. It's public relations. It's propaganda. It's just a way to get you to obey people, to pay a group of strangers to give them money. So she laments in the video that she doesn't have a birth certificate or a social security number. Well, the fact is, it's a myth, and demonstrably so. I mean, there's plenty of evidence to prove that that nobody has any citizenship. There are no citizens, there are no nations, there are no cities and states, that it's all fictional. That even if you do have a birth certificate, it is impossible to prove that you are a citizen. It's not even in the realm of possibility. Okay, this is not a religious kind of thing where people believe something without evidence. This is where people believe that they are citizens despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, that there's no such thing as a citizen. But they lead you to believe that so that you will comply. This is one of those times where you can prove a negative. You can prove with overwhelming evidence, irrefutable evidence, that there is no such thing as a citizen, no such thing as states. We've offered a $5,000 challenge for at least the last 5 years to anybody who can produce evidence of a citizen in a state. Nobody's able to do that. And I'll point out that legal citations and quoting from Black's Law Dictionary does not qualify as evidence. That's like saying the evidence that the Constitution and Code apply to me is Section 1 of the Internal Revenue Code. Of course, that's our logical fallacy that the code applies because the code said so. First, we have to discuss exactly what a citizen is. We have to define our terms so that we know what we're talking about. Loria versus United States, it's the U.S. Supreme Court talking about what a citizen is. It's not the only one. It's the easiest one for me to remember. So you go to 231 U.S. Report, page 9, and on page 22, you can see what a citizen is supposed to be, and that is a member of the body politic owing a duty of allegiance in return for a duty of protection. These are reciprocal obligations, one a consideration for the other. So you need both. You got to have the duty of protection, and you've got to have the duty of allegiance. So we also know that a state is basically a body politic. It's not a geographical location, because the state of Arizona didn't exist in 1909. That it's a body politic organized under a government occupying a certain territory. Never confuse people in a territory with a state. They're not the same thing. There's got to be a body politic organized under a government occupying that territory. So let's look at how we go about proving that there is a citizen, whether you have a birth certificate or not. The Supreme Court has laid out the definition many, many times. You have to be a member of the body politic owing a duty of allegiance in return for duty of protection, and it's that duty of protection where it all collapses. I'm going to demonstrate it two ways, completely false, that anybody is a citizen, whether they have a birth certificate or not. It's DeShaney versus County Winnebago, 489 U.S., page 189, or also Bowers versus DeVito, which is 686 Federal Second Report, page 616. And this is where they come out and they always give us the same thing. There is no duty to protect anybody. The government is under no duty to protect you, me, or anyone else. Well, we don't protect one, we protect them all. And that's the same as your insurance company saying to you after you pay the money for a couple of years and you cause an accident and they say, well, you're not covered. Well, but I got a contract. I've been paying you. Well, we don't actually cover you individually. We don't cover anybody individually. We cover the whole group. Anybody with half a brain in their head can realize that's a scam. If you're not protecting each individual, you're not protecting. Okay, so well, we can't protect everybody. Bingo. So why are you collecting money? Because it's not about protection. So that's one way. We show the legal way that there's no duty of protection, and that collapses the whole thing. If there's no duty of protection, which they admit, then there's no duty of allegiance. So the two reciprocal obligations making one a citizen are gone. So no duty to protect, no duty of allegiance. You're not a citizen. There is no body politic because, hey, there are no citizens. If there are no citizens and no body politic, there is no state. And that means that it's not a government. It's just literally men and women forcing you to pay them. That's all they are. Or like Lysander Spooner wrote, just a gang of killers, thieves, and liars. We look at just the facts, not what the courts have said, although here, I think they're telling the truth. There is no duty to protect. But if we look at just the facts, we look at how did the government come about? Were you ever asked, ever given a freely given choice whether it's going to be government? No, of course not. All support is pay or go to jail. It's compulsory. If they were interested in protecting your life, liberty, and property, they wouldn't be violating it by forcing you to pay them. If I did things like the government types and I forced you to give me money, would you consider me a criminal? Same standard applies to everybody. Government is just men and women. That's it. There is no government. There's just men and women forcing you to pay them, and we all can agree that is criminal. Because they're forcing you to pay, no duty to protect you is created. Therefore, there's no reciprocal obligation of allegiance. So once again, it all collapses. You don't have a duty of allegiance. You don't have a duty of protection. You are not a citizen. The facts are against it. Totally against it. If there are no citizens, there is no body politic. No body politic, there is no state, there is no government. They're just people. That we can prove. That's all we need to do to collapse this idea that anybody is a citizen, even if they have a birth certificate. Because it still goes into the same basic operating presumption. Well, if you're born in New York, then the Constitution and laws apply, you're a citizen. No, there's not a single shred of evidence to support that argument. And the argument being, if you're physically in New York, then the Constitution and laws apply to you. But there's no evidence to support that argument. Zero. You could say, but you're here in New York. Got that. What facts do you have that the law applies to me, though? So much blame is being put on this girl's parents because she is having a difficult time functioning because the psychopaths won't recognize her, instead of putting the blame on the psychopaths where it belongs. Hey, it's wrong to force us to pay you. If there's going to be anger directed at anybody, it should be at the ones who are criminals, the ones who are forcing you to pay them. We've got this thing called the Stockholm Syndrome, or the battered citizen syndrome, the submitizen. This idea that you can't, it's a sacred cow to question how government gets its money. They steal it. My point in the video is that not only can she not prove her American citizenship, that even if she had a birth certificate, nobody could prove she was a citizen anyway. I've spoken to probably thousands of bureaucrats, which includes cops and prosecutors and judges. None of them could prove that their laws apply or that they were citizens in states, which includes prosecutors we've confronted directly in court to prove that they had a client, and they all failed miserably.